Welcome. I'm Andy Wallace, professor in the philosophy department and acting program director for the philosophy department fall lecture series we call Forum in Law, Ethics, and Society, or FILES. And some students here are enrolled in this class, and others are taking it for extra credit, and others are here because you're a speaker. Happy to introduce Mary Gomes from our own psychology department. Mary studied psychology at Harvard, where she got her BA, and Stanford, where she got her PhD. She's been practicing Tibetan Buddhism in the early 90s. She completed the compassion cultivation training program from Stanford University Medical School in 2014. Was that the year? Well, okay. She worked with Upton Jinpon, James Doty, and others. She's been integrating compassion cultivation training methods into her classes ever since then. Please welcome Mary.
And it's so good to be here and to share this with you. And a lot of what I'm going to be sharing today comes from my experiences with teaching and some key research projects that I've been integrating into my teaching over the years. So title of the talk, Embracing Common Humanity for Personal, Political, and Cultural Healing. A lot to fit into 45 minutes. I will do the best that I can. As Dr. Wallace said, in 2014, I completed the teacher training for the Compassion Cultivation Program. And the idea here is this program integrates Tibetan Buddhism in Tibetan Buddhist practices and contemporary psychological research. And it's all distilled into an 8-week course designed to bring compassion for ourselves and for others into everyday life. Okay. And so as Andy said, one of the founders of this program, Thupten Jinpa, who for many years, and I believe still is one of the principal translators for the Dalai Lama. So the Tibetan Buddhist aspect, it has quite a pedigree behind it. And it was founded around 2012 at Stanford and still is ongoing today, offering courses and training teachers. So let me go on here to talk about our topic for the day. So compassion is really at the heart of what I'm talking about in this when I say common humanity. And compassion is defined in many ways, but one working definition I'll be using today, the feeling that arises when you're confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. So it has to do with connection with other people, but also specifically on suffering and the relief of it. Okay. So it's often used interchangeably with a broader emphasis on wishing people well. And that's actually how I'll be using it today. So suffering, but also when we more generally wish well to others. So in the 10 years since I completed my training, I've had the unique opportunity of being a secular compassion teacher here at Sonoma State, probably teaching to hundreds of students in various courses over the years. And so the last couple of decades prior to and since my training, it's really seen a major integration happen between the traditional practices of Buddhism and contemporary science. And those of you who are here for last week's talk heard quite a bit about that from a different perspective. And today I'm going to be talking more about the kind of on the ground, how does this translate into everyday life, and particularly the everyday life of students. Okay. So of all the topics that I've covered in these years of teaching, one of the most resonant for many people, and I would include myself in this, is the concept of common humanity. So, common humanity. The recognition of the shared basics of human life. We all wish to be happy. We all wish to avoid suffering. So we all have our joys and struggles. They look different for different people, but underneath the details, there is that common ground where we can all relate to each other in our shared seeking for joy, and avoidance of suffering. So just to share a few of my goals for today, since the topic could cover an entire course or more, I'm going to be introducing common humanity from the perspectives of compassion for self and compassion for others. And I'm going to share several ways to extend your sense of common humanity, including a brief contemplative practice. And my deeper wish for all of us today is that you will leave this talk really having the motivation and some specific how-tos about reaching out to more of a we feeling instead of just the me feeling. So common humanity has two faces. I call them the inward and the outward facing common humanity. And we're going to start with the inward facing. And here we turn our attention to the topic of self-compassion. So self-compassion, we'll talk first about self-compassion and how common humanity fits into that, and then compassion for others and where common humanity comes into play. So self-compassion is something that's been developed a great deal in psychology over the last 15 to 20 years. Kristin Neff is one of the central theorists and researchers in the arena of self-compassion. And self-compassion is defined as a self-attitude that involves treating oneself with warmth and understanding in difficult times, and recognizing that making mistakes is part of being human. Okay. And where common humanity comes into play here is Kristin Neff talks about there being three key aspects of self-compassion. I'm just going to briefly mention the first two: mindfulness of suffering. So when we're having a difficult moment, like this morning, got in the car to come up for my talk, and I was diverted from my usual 1-hour drive. Ended up in American Canyon and up near Napa because something must have been going on 101, and it took me 2 hours to drive here. Okay. Mindfulness of suffering would have me just take a moment and maybe just mindfully label that this is a moment of suffering. Instead of just spinning out, it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Am I going to get there in time? This always happens, blah, 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 right? Just simple, okay, this is indeed a moment of suffering. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Self-kindness, treating ourselves with kindness and care rather than judgment and self-criticism. Like, okay, how can I be kind to myself as I take this long, long, long drive to work? Okay. Turn on the music, take a deep breath, enjoy the scenery. It was actually quite lovely. Common humanity, where we come back to our topic today, seeing our imperfections as part of the larger human experience. And this also includes the awareness that everyone suffers. We're not alone in our suffering. So I didn't actually sit in traffic. I drove around it. But imagine that I had been sitting in traffic, okay, which would have been even more frustrating. And how easy it would have been to sit there and feel absolutely isolated. It's like, oh, it's just me. I'm just sitting here with all this pressure on my shoulders, just kind of marinating in that isolation. Common humanity reminds us, well, look at all those other people around me sitting in their cars, right? I'm not alone in this. And in fact, when something goes awry because of a personal flaw, maybe my time management skills weren't so good. Actually, we're pretty good this morning. I left myself 3 hours. But had I not, right, instead of beating myself up, I might remind myself, my time management skills could use some improvement, but that doesn't put me outside the bounds of humanity. We all have flaws. Okay? So that's really key to this common humanity dimension of self-compassion. In those difficult moments, remembering you're not the only one who has flaws. In fact, everybody has them. Okay? And some of these things sound kind of obvious when you hear it, But when you actually look at how the mind works moment to moment in our daily lives, many of the things that are obvious to us when we sit and think about them tend to go out the window, which is why the practices help. It's like bringing it back home. How do you apply this in your daily life? Okay. So when we apply this to, let's say, a very ordinary, common moment of suffering that a student might have. Okay. Roommate troubles.
Uh-oh.
And so if you um, don't invoke common humanity, right? If you're having roommate troubles and you take it all very much as a personal issue, then you might tell yourself, well, everyone else seems to be doing fine with their roommate. What's the problem? Why can't I make this work? And then maybe it goes on into something along the lines of, God, the way they're treating me, it kind of reminds me of how it was in middle school. And oh, something must be just basically wrong with me to be having this problem. And down you go, right? The spiral downward. So the common humanity can really kind of pull a person back from that to like, yeah, this is difficult. I never would have chosen this, but this is something that a lot of people encounter. It doesn't set me apart from the mass of people around me, right? So Neff suggests what she calls on-the-spot practices to go with each of these components of self-compassion. And I'll just skip to common humanity since that's our topic today. And the idea is when you find yourself in those difficult moments to just remind yourself with a simple phrase like, I am not alone in this, to bring yourself back from that edge of spiraling downwards. But I've also found that collective practices can be extremely helpful for instilling a sense of connection and common humanity, especially in the classroom. When I teach my course, The Psychology of Self-Compassion, usually somewhere around the middle of the course, when students are starting to get to know each other, I will once in a while build in a counsel practice. And if you're not familiar with counsel, there's just a couple of very basic guidelines. Everybody's sitting in a circle, invited to speak on whatever the topic is. In my class, it's usually just what's on your mind today, with 3 simple rules. So speak from the heart, listen from the heart, and be lean of expression so that you actually come to the end of the circle before class is over. And what I've found in my years of doing this in self-compassion class, students will start out a little bit kind of careful because like, here I am with 20, 25 classmates. What do I really want to share? And what will happen over time is magical because by the time you get about halfway around, someone is hearing something that they can relate to, and it invites them to see their own struggles in a different light because they're not carrying it alone anymore. What looked like a simple counsel practice turns into what I would call common humanity lab, because we really get to hear that our troubles aren't just our troubles. And in fact, one of the reasons that I know that roommate problems are so pervasive is from being witness to what the students are bringing into those circles. And in addition to the everyday challenges, I've seen in these councils the importance of so many ideas that help us to see the collective aspect of our personal suffering. So for instance, these would include things like imposter syndrome. So just bringing in the idea of imposter syndrome will help people to see their own individual struggles in a larger collective light. Or the idea of adverse childhood experiences and how so often we tend to hold past traumas in isolation, leading to shame and to perhaps depression. Or the many faces of systemic oppression, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, all of these things helping students and others to see that their own personal suffering doesn't set them apart, that in fact, it's often what connects us. And when we're able to share that and see that in a context of support, it's like kind of being liberated from the prison of isolation and shame. So common humanity as an important component of self-compassion. Okay. And I'm going to close this section with a quote from Brene Brown. I know there's some Brene Brown fans in the room. We love her. She's a social work professor of TED Talk fame. And if you haven't seen her TED Talks, I highly recommend it. And her quote, "If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs 3 ingredients to grow exponentially: secrecy, silence, and judgment. If you put the same amount of shame in the petri dish and douse it with empathy, it can't survive." Okay. So on that note, I'm going to shift from the inner facing common humanity to the outer. How am I doing for time?
Oh, right here.
I'm good. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So as we move on toward the outer face of common humanity, I want to share a core idea that's derived from the Buddhist tradition and amplified by current psychological research. Okay. And the idea here is that of an inner circle where our compassion flows most easily, surrounded by outer circles where it's more difficult. And so in traditional Buddhist thought, it often looks somewhat like this. Okay. And so just to clarify, just hang with me that self is the easy part in this slide. We will get to that momentarily. But traditionally, the self was seen as an easy place to feel compassion. Maybe not in current day. The benefactor is like someone who's helped you in meaningful ways. Or you might think of the benefactor as simply someone to where your compassion and heart opening is easy, just as easy as can be. Friend on the next rung out, because we love our friends, but sometimes there's competition, sometimes there's difficulties. Neutral person, okay. This is a really interesting one. This is that great mass of people who kind of fade into your background, okay. So I like to talk about the neutral people as kind of like the wallpaper of our inner lives, right? It's like they exist. We're not really thinking about them. We don't mind them. We don't feel attracted to or averse to them. They're just there. Difficult person, we all know what that means to varying extents. And then finally, outside of all of that, all beings. And we will definitely be getting back to those all beings as the talk goes on. But the details can vary. And so here's what I often use in my classes, a little more relatable to college students. And so, even if you don't have a puppy, we all know how that would feel. A classmate specifically, I'll talk about you're in a large class. There's a lot of people in there. You recognize their faces. You know absolutely nothing about them. They're just there. Your rude roommate. Need I say more? And then beyond that difficult person, all beings. So in the kind of central to this view, whatever specifics you put in the concentric circles, central to this are the ideas that first, there are ways to expand the circle of compassion. So you don't have to stop at whatever your current boundary is. There are gentle ways of kind of pushing that boundary out. And that the ultimate big picture goal here is boundless compassion. Compassion that leaves no one out. Okay. So in the classic language that's used in compassion practices from the Buddhist tradition, this is sometimes expressed by phrases such as, "May all beings be free from suffering," or my personal favorite, May all beings, conceivable and inconceivable, be free from suffering. I love those inconceivable beings. It just makes me happy to think about them. So the idea here is that once you're outside the circle, really the vision is boundless, beyond our imaginations. So I'm going to try a practice now. So this is taken right out of what I would typically do in one of my psychology classes. And so one common way of practicing common humanity is to employ a series of phrases that point in the direction of wishing well for others. Okay. So I'm going to guide you through this. You don't have to track them. You're just going to listen to my voice. And so you know what phrases we're using today. Here they are. May you be safe. May you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you live with ease. And depending on who the teacher is and what they're thinking about that day, the phrases vary. These are the ones that I picked out for today. So y'all ready for a little practice? Yeah? Okay. So to begin, I'm going to ask you to just get as comfortable as you can in these funny little chairs you're sitting in. And to either close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that, or to just rest your gaze on the table in front of you. So the idea is just you're not actively taking anything in. Okay. And feeling your feet on the floor, just feeling the groundedness of that. And taking some breaths to let go of what you don't need to carry. First breath, breathing in. And as you breathe out, letting go of any tension you might be carrying in your body. And then the next breath, breathing in. And as you breathe out, letting go of tension in your emotions. And breathing in. And as you breathe out, letting go of tension in your thoughts. And then resting your awareness gently in the area around your heart. Just breathing into that heart space. That becomes kind of like your home base for the practice. And we're going to start here by bringing to mind a being who easily opens your heart. This can be an animal, this can be a person. Just pick one for now, with the emphasis on easy. You think about this being and your heart just kind of gives a little lift. And let yourself feel how deeply you want this being to thrive. Let's take a moment to feel that, the depth of your caring and love for this being. And then directing toward them the phrases of well-wishing. May you be safe. May you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you live with ease. And again, directing these phrases toward your dear being. May you be safe. May you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you live with ease. And if you'd like, you can add the visual of some golden light that emerges from your heart and reaches your being, bringing soothing, healing energy to them. And now I invite you to let go of that image of your person or animal that you feel an open heart with so easily. Let that go for now, but staying connected to your heart. And bring to mind someone that you don't know well at all. but whose face you recognize. It could be someone that you take a class with, but you've never talked to, or the barista at your favorite cafe, the person who checks your books out at the library. Just someone whose face you recognize, you know nothing about this person, and you feel neither attraction nor aversion to them. They're just kind of neutral, like so many people that we encounter. And now consider this. Although you don't know much or anything really about this person, like yourself, they have people who love them dearly and who they love. This person is a dear friend to someone. They have hopes and dreams for their life, disappointments and heartbreak. Just like you, they have a rich inner life and they wish for happiness. And just like you, they do not wish to suffer. And yet, like everyone, they encounter suffering in their lives. Let this person momentarily be the foreground rather than the background. And with this in mind, direct toward this person the phrases of well-wishing. May you be safe. May you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you live with ease. And again, just leaning into the actual reality of this human being, adding in that golden light if you wish. May you be safe. May you be well. May you be free from suffering. May you live with ease. And then letting go of the practice, letting go of your image of this person if you're still holding it. And when you're feeling ready, open your eyes and bringing your attention back to the room. So in my classes, I will often follow this exercise with some homework, which you might call stealth compassion. And the homework is when you encounter random people as you go about your life, just silently wish them well. And I learned the hard way that it's important to emphasize the silent. Because the first time I did it, the next class, one of the students said, well, people were looking at me really strangely when I was going up and saying, may you be well. I was like, no, no, no. But I've heard from many people that it just shifts the tone of their day remarkably and basically creates a sense of friendliness around you. And on that note, I'm going to share with you a very brief, like a 2-minute video, which I have to get out of my, oh yeah, that. So Sharon Salzberg, who's just an amazing teacher. Let's see if I can make this work. Yes.
Shower. No need to rush. Slow down. Stop. See. Be simply aware of what is going on. Take in the world. Notice each person as they hurry by. Look at them. Follow their path as they travel through space. This moment, truly see them. Each one is a unique individual. What a wonderful chance to offer them loving kindness. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. May you be joyful. May you be peaceful. May you be contented. May you be at ease. May you be safe. May you be healthy. Just as you seek happiness, all beings everywhere also want happiness. Offer everyone you see and everyone unseen unconditional good wishes. May all beings be at peace. This is street loving kindness. This is Sharon.
Where to? Hmm. Okay. So going on from there. Okay. Okay. So just a quick note on why do this. Okay. It's good for us as we do it. The world becomes friendlier. I could give you lots of research on that, but I'm going to limit myself to 2 studies on something else I'll talk about in a moment. And it's good for how we treat others. It's like paving the way to actual kindness, non-verbally as well as in our actions and in our words. But what about the rest of the title of this talk? The political and cultural healing. Okay. Now, this is a seriously tall order for a 45-minute talk. So I'm going to go as far with it as I can, but I just want to let you know that there's a tremendous amount to be said here. Okay. Practices like these can counter the dehumanization that's often directed toward people in stigmatized groups, as well as helping all of us to overcome the ever increasing subtle dehumanization that happens in our everyday lives. And so I want to look briefly at 2 research findings and their real world implications. So Princeton social psychologist Susan Fiske understands dehumanization through the lens of mind perception. Okay. And in her words, she says, empathy for another's happiness and suffering depends fundamentally on recognizing that the other has a mind. That is, the same capacities for thought, emotion, desire, intention, and self-awareness as ourselves. Okay. The fact is, mind perception is a slippery thing. Right? If I were to ask, like, imagine you encounter a random person on the street. Okay. And if someone were to ask you, does this person have a mind? I'm sure you would say, well, of course they do, right? But are you truly experiencing them in this way? Okay. So in order to explore the vagaries of mind perception, Fiske and neuroscientist Lasana Harris used a really interesting approach. They drew on brain imaging studies that had established a link between mind perception and activation in a particular area of the brain called the medial prefrontal cortex. This is as technical as we're getting today. Yeah. Just to give you a very general sense of where we're talking about.
Laser pointer.
Oh.
Oh, no need.
Thanks so. So when we encounter a person in such a way that centers our awareness on their mind, this becomes more active, the medial prefrontal cortex, making it a proxy for mind perception. Okay. So in other words, when we perceive someone as having a mind, the medial prefrontal cortex becomes active. And when we're not perceiving their mind, it doesn't. Now, this is an oversimplification, but you get the basic idea. So back to the question of the random person on the street. So while we might abstractly acknowledge the fact that they have a mind, are we genuinely experiencing it? And according to Fiske's research, it depends in part on who they are. While images of people typically evoke activity in this part of the brain, when people in a social neuroimaging lab were shown photos of people in outcast groups, such as drug addicts and people experiencing homelessness, their medial prefrontal cortices often failed to activate. So this is a disturbing finding, but it's not the end of the story. In a follow-up, Harris and Fiske gave people a simple task that required that they imagine the internal world of the otherwise dehumanized person. They were asked to infer, and this almost sounds silly, they're asked to infer that person's vegetable preferences. It's like this seemingly inconsequential judgment worked a small miracle, activating the medial prefrontal cortex, and presumably helping to overcome the tendency to dehumanize. Just like me, this homeless person enjoys carrots. This person who's addicted to drugs appreciates broccoli. It might sound trivial, but apparently it isn't. So such a basic human universal as food is an easy first step for establishing common ground. And from there, we might imagine more personal commonalities. Just like me, this person loves their dog. Just like me, this person ticketing my car is a Giants fan. Just like me, the cousin that I have intense political differences with loves his children. So you can see how this just like me idea is incredibly potent. But also, in the time remaining, there's one more research study that I want to share with you that points us toward a surprisingly simple step toward nudging out the boundaries of our circle of compassion. And this study took place at Harvard, where people who were drumming together in a lab study were more likely to go to significant trouble to lighten the workload of their drumming partner, who they didn't know. And so basically, any kind of synchronous activity tends to increase your sense of how much like you your partner is. And once they're seen as somewhat like you, your compassion flows more easily. So we see this, as in the study, in situations like drum circles. Where am I? Okay. Dancing together, playing music together, doing the wave at sporting events, or in endless other ways. We've been using synchronous activity to bring people together into groups since the beginning of humanity, and apparently now there's clear research evidence that it works. All of these things knit people together in networks of mutual compassion, strengthening group cohesion. When we act in rhythm with another, we tend to more easily look at that person and say, they are like me, which I think explains a lot of my experiences as a musical theater geek in high school. Okay, so let's summarize some of the things that you learned about how you can personally expand your circle of compassion. Compassion practices, kind of formal practices using the phrases of well-wishing. On-the-spot practices, may you be well, to random strangers that you encounter. Reminding yourself of similarities between yourself and others, just like me. Synchronous activities. And as we're coming close to the end, I'd like to revisit an earlier slide. This Buddhist idea of may all beings without exception be well. The difference between all beings without exception and all beings, except that one over there, that is vast. Okay? Because once we have the exception, that means that the circle of compassion has an outside. And when the circle of compassion has an outside, any of us could end up there.
Yeah.
So I am in love with this idea. I can't say that it's an easy one to practice. By no means is it an easy one to practice. And the question comes up, how does this play out in a world where so much destruction is unfolding? I have a few thoughts to share about this. So one, just on an everyday level, common humanity as a basis for political dialogue. How often do we succeed in changing minds and hearts by shaming people? It doesn't work. So there are times, and it varies by situation, obviously, but there are times when seeing the humanity in political adversaries can help us to communicate in ways that might open doors. And if not on the spot immediately, perhaps planting seeds for the future. And at the very least, if we know that we don't have to push people out of our hearts to have strong convictions, we might find it easier to act on our convictions. But what about the most difficult people? Those who are carrying out harm. When we feel compassion for someone who is being destructive, when we wish them well, we aren't wishing them success in their destructive endeavors. In fact, it's the opposite. It would not be good for them or for those around them for them to continue behaving in that way. So doing what we can to stop or prevent their harmful behavior may in fact be the most compassionate thing that we could do.
Abs-
And Kristen Neff, the self-compassion researcher, has a name for this: fierce compassion. So in her words, compassion helps us to clearly see what's going on and to understand the complex reasons people act as they do. This allows us to take appropriate action to stop harmful behavior without sorting people into categories of good and bad. This helps us to stand up to injustice without making a bad situation worse through blame or hatred. This can apply to either a social, political situation or a personal one, in which we allow anger to motivate us without demonizing anyone. And it circles back around to self-compassion. Because if we aren't trying to prove to ourselves or others that we are perfect, we'll be less defensive and more open to genuine learning and change. If we know that as we struggle through learning new things and becoming better people in the world, that we won't make mistakes that land us outside the circle of compassion. We're going to be, I think, much braver in looking for where we need to learn and grow. So I'd like to end with an invitation. Let me first see. Yes, okay. Make an intention to refrain from dehumanizing others in either blatant or subtle ways. And an intention is a little different from a resolution, right? I like to think of an intention as like an inner compass. It's pointing you somewhere. You know the direction you're aiming to go in. It doesn't mean it's going to be simple. It doesn't mean there won't be times when it all completely blows up. But just to hold that intention, no matter how crazy things get politically, or no matter how much it's frustrating that you're acting for change in the world and there's obstacle after obstacle, keep going, but without the dehumanization. To hold that as an intention, that is my invitation to you today. And you can practice it when you encounter people from a stigmatized group. You can practice it when you're stuck in traffic or at a long line at the grocery store and the people ahead of you just feel like obstacles. When you're tempted to disparage a friend or a family member due to political differences, just like me, this person encounters suffering in their life. Just like me, this person has goals, longings, and dreams. Just like me, this person wishes to be happy. So if you would like any of these references, I have a blog post that's got some of them on there. You're more than welcome to use this QR code. And finally, I just want to thank all of you for being here and to Andy for inviting me. And yeah, so thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mary, we have 10 minutes for questions.
Mhm.
And I have this mic, which we're using for recording. That's why I'm going to take it around. Any questions for Mary? Okay, wait, let me come all the way back there. I think you just hold it.
Okay, hold.
Yeah, you just hold.
Which
Yeah,
one?
just hold.
Oh,
Just-
hi. I had a question when you had your circle about, the different levels of people. I noticed that they were all people, but I think we can also potentially have compassion for all living beings like animals, right? So, a lot of Buddhists are vegetarian because of their compassion for animals. So I was wondering, how do we kind of, balance, right? The fact that most of us like want, compassion for all beings, but most of us like aren't vegetarians and therefore might not live in line with those values. Like, how do we kind of think about that issue of compassion towards animals?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Wen. And so that original set of circles was kind of like the traditional one, and yet, I mean, just the fact that the first one that I updated put the puppy in the middle really shows that this is not just about humans. And in fact, I'll just to veer off from the vegetarian question for a moment, I've been doing a lot of work with the just like me practice in nature with non-humans. And in fact, I wish I had a link handy for it, but we've just put up a series of outdoor meditations up on the Sonoma State Sustainability website for people to do that. And there's a lot of things that can be done to open our hearts to the mindedness of non-humans, that it's kind of like low-hanging fruit. It's so easy once you do it, but we seldom think to do it. And then, I do think that in so many ways that the way that we're living is causing suffering to not only other people, but to animals in many different ways. And so absolutely, there's a lot to be done on bringing our behavior in line. But I think that that first step of really acknowledging in our hearts the presence of a being there is a crucial first step.
Just hold.
Hi, I really loved all of that. That was really great. I had a quick question regarding boundless compassion.
Uh-huh.
How do you have compassion for people who, in your eyes, commit atrocities, or crimes against humanity?
Right.
How do you make space for them in your circle of compassion?
Yeah, and I'm again another question that's so important. And I think I'm going to give you a head answer and a heart answer, and they're different. Okay. So the head answer is kind of like what I was saying before, that I'm certainly not, when I try to direct compassion towards someone who's doing harm on that level, I am not wishing them success by any means. And in my deeper sense of how the world works, I believe that if that person really was at peace with themselves, that their likelihood of engaging in those ways would lessen. Although there's also a whole systemic part of what we're seeing that needs to be addressed on its own terms, that it's not just a matter of one individual after another waking up. The systems need to change as well. Okay, that's the head answer. The heart answer is I only try it when I'm really ready. I mean, I try not to go out of my way to demonize or to focus on the people I really think poorly of, right? But I remember this one day when I was just like, I could just feel, okay, I can do this, I can do this. And just this little moment of like, Trump may be well. And there was a little bit of like, just be well, just go be well, but if I were to try to make myself do that on an ongoing basis in my practice, I would be practicing hypocrisy. That's why you start with where the heart is warm. And I think having a kind of the view of it really will do no good to hate extra, helps a lot as well. That could easily be a whole talk unto itself. And thank you for asking that question.
Excuse me, I have a sense that,
Mhm.
I like to say that when we demonize,
Mhm.
we become demonic. When we dehumanize, we become inhumane.
Good point.
And how are we gonna choose?
Mhm.
And how do we attend to those who have to make those choices and may not be aware of that?
Mhm.
And it's to make space for a different choice.
Yeah.
And to hold that space.
Yeah.
In a loving way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're almost out of time.